I can work with you on your documents. We can shake that up. I can work with you as long as we need to. However, I don't get to walk into the interview with you. You have to do it on your own. And so that is where it's worth investing time and money to get that part of the process right. And the human brain works very well in threes. We remember threes. We like threes. So I say always do 3 little action steps.
Yes.
And the same applies when you're doing an interview. I don't believe you have your full, well-rounded success until you give up the victim mentality and actually go and find your own empowerment.
Wendy, welcome to the show. So great to have you here.
Thank you, Brad. Lovely to be here.
Absolutely. So for those who haven't encountered your work, perhaps you could share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your story.
Okay, so Wendy Alexander is my name. I am the founder and creator at Happy Career Hub. And fundamentally, I'm a career coach, but also what I call a business copywriter. So I do a lot of writing for small to medium business, and then write resumes, LinkedIn profiles, cover letters, negotiation packs, that kind of thing for mid-level careerists. So I tend to work with people who are coming to that stage of their career where they either trying to change careers or they're going for the next level of promotion or seniority in their jobs and things like that. So that's the ideal client. I do work with some graduates, but usually only the graduates of the people I've worked with. So some of my clients have had success with working with me, and then when their kids graduating uni, they send the kids to me. So graduates are not my usual client, but they are the children of my successful clients.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I do in terms of work. I was in corporate for 23 years in project management office, a leader, hiring for some of the biggest projects in Australia. So I've worked for all the big companies like Telstra, banks, all the banks, the telcos, the consulting companies, and had a very successful career. And how that happened was, I probably have to backtrack a little bit. The story that led me to the coaching was about me trying to find a way for myself.
This episode is brought to you by Start With Values. If you'd like to reduce stress and increase fulfillment in your work and life, then check out startwithvalues.com. There, you'll be able to download the Values app, which helps you to discover your core values and bring them to life through micro habits. There is a values course so that you can learn about the science and practice of core values, and you'll be able to pre-register for my forthcoming book called Start With Values. I hope that these tools will enable you to achieve more fulfillment and make more meaningful decisions on your journey of life. Now back to the episode.
I was pregnant when my relationship ended, and I had to start again. And I did the numbers and saw that I actually couldn't afford life with my daughter, my newborn. And so my aim was to find a role that was going to give me an extra $20,000 a year. Now, that was a big jump, but I used the little money I had saved to have coffees with recruiters, coffees with hiring people, pick their brains, and then created a system, a framework of writing resumes a certain way, interviewing a certain way, and within about 6 months, landed a role that jumped my income by $50,000. And people who knew my story, knew where I'd come from, knew the rock bottom I had hit in my life, started coming to me for some help. And that's how the coaching business was born, helping other people get what I had achieved for myself. But it was a very part-time business. So I spent 23 years in corporate, climbing the ladder, doing the coaching business on the side, and then hit my next big challenge in the mid-40s when I went into early menopause. And that was when I realized I wanted to do something different. So I actually took my business full-time and left corporate. And this is what I've been doing since.
Sounds like very fulfilling work. helping people
It
at
is.
those critical points in their life, because a lot of people get to those critical decisions and they're resistant to change, or they feel so uncomfortable trying to shift from where they are. And there is a big risk there, but you come from a place of experience. Whereas many coaches, and I've worked with many coaches who are incredible, but some of them haven't actually had the experience in the corporate environment, and they don't actually know what it's like to go from that stable place and take the leap and move on to the next point. So it must be quite fulfilling accompanying people on that journey.
It is. It's a very fulfilling thing to do, especially when you work with people through their fears. And yes, people do fear. Some people get very, very comfortable in a role. They've been there for 20 years. Now, what's been happening lately is there's been quite a few companies in Australia, and this happens in cycles, right?
Yeah.
Every few years, there's a dip, meaning companies start cutting costs and they release lots of jobs into the market. So often the people that get released into the market are people that have been in the role for 20 years, 25 years. They haven't written their resume in as long. They haven't interviewed in as long. And by the time they spilled out into the market, they are shell-shocked.
Yeah.
They don't know how to interview. They don't know how to write a resume that's going to stand out. They're now in a market that's flooded, which means if they write their standard old resume, they're not standing out. So they don't get the interviews in. And that's often the people that I work with. And so I have to work with them to try and, first of all, get over the shock, right? Because when you're released into the market in your mid-level career stage, it can be incredibly confronting for people. So there's that side of it. Sometimes I also work with people who are unhappy in a certain position and they're trying to go for a promotion, but they're constantly overlooked. And both types of clients require me helping to bring out their wins and their achievements. And this is where I see people really challenged. They don't know how to articulate the good that they've done. And so they write resumes with a focus on the tasks and the responsibilities. But most hiring people now, especially in current markets, don't want to see a list of your jobs, of your tasks and responsibility. They don't want to see something that reads like a job description. They want to see how you've won, what you've contributed in previous roles. And that's where people have difficulty. So my job as a coach is I work with them to pull that out of them. And then as a writer, I'm a wordsmith, always have been, was writing since I was a kid, during life in South Africa with all its challenges. I wrote my way out of a lot of that darkness and challenge. So I've always been a writer and always been comfortable using words. And so what I then do with clients is I shape up their stories in their documents. And so often I've got a fairly successful hit rate, 98, 99% hit rate in helping people get interviews. But then the next stage happens in that whole job application. They now have to interview. And this is where people also struggle. So some of the work that I do most of, and I would say my biggest seller in my business, is the interview coaching, because people struggle. They might get the interview, and then they start doing the interview and they're not performing very well, right? People waffle. They become very nervous about articulating their achievements. They don't know how to align their achievement stories to what's required in the job description of the potential hiring person. And so there's two phases. There's the getting people the interviews through really good career documents. And there's the next phase is getting the job offer through strong interviews. And so that's fundamentally the work that I do and how I try to help people succeed in landing either a new career, because some people want to pivot into a completely different industry, or others simply want to grow, and they maybe have been overlooked a few times for promotion. So then when they come to me, we have to work on positioning them, making them more visible in the company, coaching them on how to speak up in meetings so that they're starting to share their ideas and not being reticent and shy and afraid to contribute, right? Because you only are visible if you make yourself visible.
Absolutely.
right? That's what I've seen.
Yeah. I love the convergence of your skills, of the coaching side and the experience with change, and the storytelling, helping people tell their stories in a more effective way rather than a story. I mean, no one wants to read a story that's like a business plan. You want to read a
Yes.
story that's, this is my story of transformation and what I've achieved over the years. So for someone out there who's writing their CV and they've listed, I worked as a project manager and I did this and this and this. Well, what would you suggest to them? How can you reframe something to be more inspiring and show? Is it about focusing on what the result was? Positively impacted the lives of 500 people by doing X. How would you help them?
Yes. So look, the framework that I use, there's so many different frameworks, and people have had the STAR framework and the SAO. Lately, the latest buzz one is called the CAR framework, which is describe the challenge, the actions, and the result.
Okay.
And so I say to people, keep it really simple. So, for example, if you were a project manager that went into a team and maybe the team was underperforming, then you could write something like, uplifted a flailing project team. But that's not that inspiring. What does it mean? Okay, we know you uplifted the team. What's more inspiring is how did you do that? So you want to go a little bit deeper, but you don't want to be too long-winded. So you could say, uplifted a flailing project team by introducing one-to-one meetings, having team bonding sessions, looking at training that was needed. And this increased productivity in the team by 35%. Now you've got a story. And I didn't use a lot of words to tell that story, right? That's probably just a sentence. But because you've put in 3 action steps that you've taken, and you've, I suppose, made the achievement more concrete with a number, because numbers really add value to a story. So if you say you've turned productivity around by 35%, now I'm the interviewer or the hiring person. I'm looking at that and I'm going, wow, right? This was the challenge the person faced when they walked onto that project. These are the action steps they did, and this is the result. And so many people don't know how to do that, or even if they do know how to do that, they don't do it. So they'll have an achievement in their mind. An achievement is uplifted a flailing project team. Well, if I'm reading that and I'm the hiring person, I'm going to go, how? So the how is missing.
Yeah.
And what was the result? Did you actually, and how did you turn that team around? Like, by what percentage was the team performing at this percentage? And by the time you finished with them, they were at that percentage. I always tell people, qualify the achievement. If you can use a number or a metric to support it, then do that. Some achievements, you don't have a metric to support that. That's fine, but still list your action steps, that happened. The 3, and the human brain works very well in 3s. We remember 3s. We like 3s. So I say always do 3 little action steps.
Yes.
And the same applies when you're doing an interview. If someone asks you a question in an interview, tell me about a difficult person you worked with. So then you start off with the challenge. Here was the challenge. What did you do to have a conversation or to turn that relationship around? What were the 3 top things you did? And I always say to people, if you always remember the 3 top things you did, you're never going to go wrong in either writing your achievement or in actually speaking it in an interview. If you start listing 6 actions you took, by that stage, the interviewer's forgotten the first 2. Right?
Exactly.
Look, I've done, over my years, I've looked at a lot of, I did psychology at uni as well. So I know sales psychology is very effective when you stick to that 3, because it's easy for the human brain to absorb it and to remember it. And so they're going to remember you. Oh, this is the person that did these 3 actions to turn that problem around.
Makes so much sense.
So it's very simple, but people seem to have difficulty with it. And part of it, I also say the other thing is, if you go back to my parents' generation, and especially in a place like South Africa, somehow in our communities, we taught not to brag and boast. You taught to be humble. But I say when it comes to your job and your resume, you need to brag and boast. You do it in a tasteful way, but you actually have to be willing to sell some of what you've achieved. That's the time. That's the one time you get the tick for bragging and boasting, tastefully, of course.
Yes.
But you need to be the person highlighting the wins, how you won on the project, how you won in the company, how you helped others win, because that's also very important. It's not just about that awareness of what you've done, but how have you helped other people grow and succeed. So always do the EQ skills, which is the leadership skills, the problem solving skills, the collaboration skills, the teaming skills. Weave those into your job specific skills as well, because they're really important, especially in the current market.
And add a number. I think that's super, super important and impressive, because it shows that if you've got that blend of the soft skills and you say, we approached this with creativity and I was a leader with empathy and we achieved a 57% increase in growth, like as an outsider, you go, well, this person has high credibility because you really are tuned into all dimensions of the working experience. I love the car approach. I haven't heard of that before. And also like the rule of three. I mentioned that in my forthcoming book. Triads are just easier to remember. It's, in comedy it works. There's the three little pigs, the three witches. It's in children's stories, the ABCs. It's everywhere. So stick to that. It makes so much sense. Now, this obviously helps someone rewrite their story and their CV as a result. And that's probably the first step in building that self-confidence for when they walk into the interview. But for someone who's afraid of that interview process, what advice would you give them?
Well, if someone's afraid of interview process, for me, I highly recommend that they do go to a coach.
Yes.
Right? Because I've seen people try to practice with a family member or a colleague, but you're not going to get the honest feedback that you need. Mm-hmm. Because fundamentally, someone is not your family member. If you're practicing with a family member, I wouldn't suggest that they know everything about the role that you're going for. So you do need to go and work with someone who's got that broad experience. Yeah. My specialty is in corporate and technology, because that's where I come from. But I've done this for, I had the part-time career coaching business for 15 years and it's been full-time for 4 years. So 19 years. There's a lot of experience there. I've practiced with so many people for interviews. I myself, when I was hiring, interviewed hundreds and hundreds of candidates. So I think you need someone with the proper experience. If you go and practice with a colleague, a family member, I don't think they're going to give you the feedback that you need. So you could be rabbiting on in an answer, and the person's not going to know that answer is too long, has got too much waffle. They're just going to think, oh, well, you sound confident because you're talking long. But in current interview trends, what they don't want is, I say to my clients, if you're talking longer than 2 to 2.5 minutes on any answer, you're talking too long. Because here's the thing to remember. You've got a very busy recruiter or you've got a very busy hiring manager, and they've prepared maybe 10 to 12 questions. They're giving you 45 minutes to an hour. They want to get all of their questions answered, because some of their questions is going to be job specific, some is going to be behavioral style questions, and so on. If they don't get to ask all their questions because you've taken 5 minutes on each answer, you could leave that interviewer with a big question mark over you. And one of the big question marks could be, how does this person fit into our culture, into our team? Maybe that was 3 questions at the end. They didn't get the chance to ask it. They now have to move on to the next thing on their agenda. Interview's closed. And so that could be the doubt factor for them. And so that's why you need to be concise. That's one reason, is to be aware of the busy interviewer and the fact that they need to ask as many questions as they can, because they're going to ask you a broad range, and it's all about determining if you have the right skill, but more importantly, how you fit into that company. Are you a good fit for the company culture? The other reason is, if you waffling, that's an indication to a lot of people that you can't succinctly sell yourself. That's going to be a little bit of a negative against you, because sometimes you may be the person that gets hired as a project manager or get hired as a business analyst or any of those, a business and anything like that. And you in with their clients and you now have to sell an idea. If you can't sell that idea quickly to your new company's potential clients, that's going to be a challenge. So they're testing you in various ways in that interview setting. They're testing you for your ability to be compelling and succinct, for your awareness, like how aware is this candidate? They must know that we only have 45 minutes. Are they going to give me the opportunity to actually ask all my questions? And also to potentially have 2 or 3 minutes at the end for them to ask questions. That's the other side of it.
Yeah.
They want you to ask 1 or 2 questions at the end so that they can determine how much research you've done on the company, how interested you are in the role, all of these things. Mm-hmm. And so where I've seen people really fall down in interviews is in the waffle, talking too long, not answering the question. And here again, if you stick to the challenge, because a challenge you can describe in 30 seconds, right? Whatever the challenge is, if I ask a question, you can describe it in 30 seconds. You can then take a minute to do your 3 little action steps and then another 30 seconds about the result. But if you don't have that framework, that's going to be a problem,
Yes.
And look, people do get nervous, and interviewers, most of them, I'd say 95% of interviewers are aware of people's nerves. So they will allow for leeway. But if they see you aren't able to move past that initial waffle. So people expect you to waffle in the first 1 or 2 questions because they know, you're just starting out, you're a little bit nervous. But they do expect you to start to gain momentum and get a little bit more confidence as the interview goes on. And I haven't seen that happen without really focused practice, right? I haven't seen that. And I've worked with many, many people who've gone. They've got the resumes. They've come to me for the written work. Mm-hmm. They go and they try their hand at the interviews, and within a couple of months, maybe 2 months, sometimes 8 weeks, 6 weeks, they're not landing the jobs. And they start to recognize, and look, if they're fortunate, some interviews will give them feedback. But many don't give you feedback, so you don't know where you're falling short. Yeah. Right? But there are good ones, and they're only a handful. Most of them are so busy they don't have time to give people feedback, but some of them will. And then I've had clients come to me and the interviewer has told them, you waffle too much. You didn't answer the questions. Some of them have had feedback which has been really hurtful for them. You occur like a professional robot. You're not relatable. Right? So those are some of the harsh critics. But most of them wouldn't even get that feedback. So what I try to do with my clients when we go through the practice sessions is the very first session we do, I'm actually giving them a lot of feedback. Yeah. I'm saying to them, you spoke 3 minutes, that was too long. And I give them scenarios on here's how you could pull that answer in. Here's where you can answer. This is how you need to answer it. What I've seen is that after a couple of sessions, and it usually only takes 3 or 4, they're so different from the time they start to the time we finish. The confidence has grown, but that's because they're getting the feedback all the time. Mm-hmm. I let them speak and I don't stop them. When they finish the answer, I say, that was a 4-minute answer, because I do time them. And I say, and this is where you went too long, or this is where you didn't do the CAR framework. Stick to the 3, 3, 3, 3, all the way through, because the interviewer is going to remember it. It's easy for you. If you're trying to have too many examples or too many action steps, then you're going to get yourself confused and in a tiz about it. I say to people, if you struggle with interviews, even if you don't spend money on writing the documents, because that's something you can learn. I've created some workshops, step-by-step guides, which are digital products. People can use that. It's at a decent price point. They don't have to come to me. The step-by-step is in there on how to write it. A strong resume, a strong LinkedIn. But where you need to consider spending your money with a coach is in interviews, because that is fundamentally where you have to perform, and also where I don't go with you. I can work with you on your documents. We can shape that up. I can work with you as long as we need to. However, I don't get to walk into the interview with you. You have to do it on your own. And so that is where it's worth investing time and money to get that part of the process right.
Yeah, a lot of people think getting a coach is a luxury, but look at any sports team. A sports player nowadays will not just have one coach, they'll have multiple coaches for the different dimensions
Correct.
of well-being and mindset and actual skill. If you want to succeed and you're taking it seriously, there's no other choice, I think, than to invest. Even if you're quite confident, just iron out the little kinks, just improve
Yes.
how you articulate your ideas. There's always room for improvement. That's really inspiring, and I'm sure it's helped so many people along the journey. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey, and I see some beautiful South African artwork in the background. I grew up in South Africa, so we have a very common thread, although probably quite a different view of what it was like, pre 1995 kind of thing. It was a very different place. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story.
So I grew up in South Africa and migrated to Australia at the age of 20. So I had a good portion of my life there. And obviously, I'm what they classify as coloured, Cape coloured. So, had the mixed race thread flowing through the family line and lineage. And so grew up in apartheid, where it was, we were segregated. So you had the white neighborhoods, you had the black neighborhoods, and you had the colored neighborhoods. And I grew up in the colored neighborhood. And look, I learned very young that, unfortunately, learned at the age of 6, 7, I think it was 6 or 7, realized that the country was segregated. Up until then, you a child, you don't know what's going on. You living in your community, you out on the streets playing hopscotch, you playing your games, you playing hide and seek, you in the neighbor's yard and all of this. And you don't know that there's segregation until it occurs the very first time. And for me, the very first time was the family going to a beach in South Africa, in Cape Town, well, on the Cape Peninsula, and, being put off the beach because it was a whites-only beach. But we didn't know that. It wasn't a very popular beach, so it was quite a remote beach. And when we pulled up onto the beach, we couldn't see the signs. The signs weren't obvious. So we just had our picnic there, the kids, the adults, and then 2 police officers came and we were put off the beach, told to leave. The sign was pointed to us, which was quite a distance away, and obviously we left. But that was my introduction to apartheid, to segregation, to what that was all about. And I didn't really become involved in, I always was very careful after that. After that, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So then I'm asking my parents, where can I go? What can I do? There's beaches you can't go to. There's cinemas you can't go into. You ride in certain carriages on the train. So there's the whites only carriage, the colored carriage, blacks carriage. That was the way it was set up. It was bizarre because it's not that long ago that was happening. I know there was all the civil rights movement and all that stuff happening in America as well. But yeah, we obviously saw it in South Africa, and it was institutionalized.
Yeah.
It was entrenched in the laws of South Africa. So that was a very, very challenging environment to grow up in. Mm-hmm. And then I was a bit of a rebel, also very curious kid. So, hammered my parents for questions. I'm sure they tried to shut me up many times. Because I'm like, why is it like this? And why can't I do that? And all of these things. But then went on to high school. And it was when I was in high school that I probably became a little bit of a political activist, started to go to the protests and all of those things. In the meantime, parallel to that, my father had been trying to move us out of the country because many times we were caught up in violence. There would be police opening gunfire on the protesters and all of these things, tear gassing everything many times. And my mother was having a real challenge coping with that. Mum had high blood pressure and she was getting quite unwell because she was just worried, my kid's going to come home alive today, right? This and that's going on. They're caught up in protests, caught up in this, that, and the other. And so Dad had been trying for years to get us out and eventually succeeded just literally a few months before my brother turned 21. My brother's older than me. I was 20, he was 21, turning 21. And so we had to leave in a hurry as well, because if we didn't leave with my brother before his 21st birthday, he couldn't leave. He would have to go on his own. So it was a rush out of the country. You weren't allowed to take a lot of money out of the country back then. So, when we started here, it was literally with nothing. 5 kids, mom and dad, and began the life here. And that was difficult too, because, how do I describe it? I was so used to that life in South Africa that even though I had freedom in Australia, I do recall in the first year of being in Australia, I was looking for the whites only signs. So it's kind of like you're free, but in your mind, you're not yet free. It was a very strange time to live through those first 2 years, I would say. And all of us struggled. All the kids, my 4 siblings, we all struggled to settle into life in Australia. So did my mother, because now she had a different set of worries. Her children were unhappy. We were struggling, didn't know how to fit in. I remember going into the city one day with my cousin, and I said to her, "What train can I get on?" And she's like, she had been living here for 5 years prior to me. So she goes, "You're not in South Africa anymore. You can go on any carriage. You can go." But it took some time getting used to that. So that was, I suppose, the first lot of overcoming in my life. Migrating, overcoming some of what was South Africa. And I have to say, it took a long time for me to let go of some of that. That happened with counseling, a lot of counseling. Here again, going to find coaching or counseling, whatever it is that you think you need. I don't think you get through some of those kinds of trauma without actually going to actively seek support. And that's my encouragement to a lot of people, is like, don't be afraid to go seek counseling or to seek the coaching or whatever it is that you need when you've been through great challenges, right? And I'd say I've probably only been I can speak about all of that time without being triggered, put it that way. But when I first came to Australia, I couldn't. People would bombard me at university. I went to Monash Uni, and because they heard I came from South Africa, they would bombard me with questions. What was it like? And it was so traumatic, relaying the experience over and over and over again. So it took going to seek help, and then I suppose my next big challenge was choosing a bad relationship that ended in disaster, right? And I nearly lost my baby. I ended up as a single mom before my daughter was born. So that for me, as I said, was my rock bottom, because I lost everything. I lost my home. I'd worked 3 jobs to buy a home, lost it in that whole separation, and had to start with a young kid, on my own. But I say the mess ended up turning into success because something drove me. It was the love for my child. So we're getting into some of my values. My love has always sort of driven me, the community. I had support from a lot of community, family, spirituality. That came into my life too then. I wasn't very spiritual back then. But I tell you, when you're forced down a dark road,
You need it.
You go seeking anywhere and everywhere, put it that way. So it was books first for me. And I came across Wayne Dyer's books. That was the first lot of transformational books that I started to read. And through those books, went on the road of spirituality, because it was Wayne Dyer's work that I started to really follow. And also found Tony Robbins and Louise Hay and all of those, right? So that was where the turnaround journey, I say, happened. But it wasn't a quick journey. It is a process. It was a few years. I would say that I started to feel like I was coming into my own probably when my daughter was about 6 years old. So it was like literally, but I was very aware that I needed to sort myself out, because I was very aware that I wanted to give my daughter a really good life. I didn't want her to experience a lot of the violence that I'd experienced in my life. I didn't want that for her. That was a driving factor. So sometimes you need something, whatever that something is. For me, it was my daughter. But I came into what I feel was like the healing time of my life as she was approaching school. So it was a good 6 years before this head got sorted out, you know?
Yeah.
But I think it's important for people to go on the journey, not to be afraid to do it. And you're going to stumble. I stumbled many times, and there were times I didn't feel like going back to my counselors, especially when they confronted me and asked me that all-important question like, how did you attract that? What role did you play in? That was difficult because, you know, it's very easy to want to point the finger and blame, and in some ways be a victim. But you can't, I don't believe you have your full, well-rounded success until you give up the victim mentality and actually go and find your own empowerment. I've never seen it happen. Maybe it does happen, but I've never seen someone continue to sit in victim mode or blame mode. And that's across literally everything.
Yep.
Everything, even all the issues that we're experiencing in the world today. The moment you step out and you go and work out, okay, how can we make this better? How can I make myself better? How can we make our community better? How can we make our family better? And face some home truths of your own. I had to be very honest with myself about lots of things. And it's one of the pillars that drives me. Honesty is the best policy, you know, in everything, even with yourself. And it's hard. It is not easy.
It's so true. It's so true. What a story. And I think people who listen to this podcast are on that journey of seeking out tools and resources and stories such as yours. And those books really changed so many people's lives. And now there is an abundance of them. You can walk into a bookstore and there are so many. And people sometimes say to me, well, where should I start? Pick something up and see what resonates. I mean, it could be Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule, or it could be Tony Robbins, or it could be, Joe Dispenza. There's one for people who like more scientific kind of information. There's so much out there. Just find something that resonates for you. But the reading and doing is slightly different. You've actually got to start practicing and challenging your beliefs. And as you said, I think probably the most important thing any of us can do is shift from victim to creator. I mean, imagine if Nelson Mandela had sat in prison on Robben Island and played victim. Imagine how different the world would be. Instead he adjusted and said, no, I'm going to create a new reality. So that's shifting from victim to creator. And anyone can do this at a point in time. You mentioned using the Values app. Thank you for testing it out. I really appreciate it. What were your top 5 values?
So love, community, family, honesty, spirituality. That's my top 5. And it was perfectly aligned to me because, look, the honesty would probably have been the challenging one. When I look back, the others have woven their thread through my life. But I wasn't always honest with myself. But as I said, I had to be, if I was going to create this different life for my daughter and myself, it had to start with me. And once I engaged in that activity of really taking a look in the mirror, realized that there was power in taking a look in the mirror, being honest with myself. Because after all, when you do that, there's nothing to hide anymore. Otherwise, you're always trying to hide something. And gosh, you've got to keep up with all the different posturing you're trying to do in the world. And I'm like, well, it's so burdensome. I think when you go down that road for yourself, literally looking at the mirror for yourself and being honest, it becomes a pillar that then guides everything else. And it's how I work with people as well. I'm very honest with people. I don't work with everybody. Everyone that I do work with over a period of time, I have a conversation with them for 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, depending on how long we go. And that initial conversation is to determine if the person is ready. Because if you're not ready, you're wasting your time, my time, and your money. Right? And I'm very honest about that. I say to people, yes, I can make money off people, whether they're ready or not. But at the end of the day, for me, it's more important to get the result for the person.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important to get the result for the person. And that means we have to be really honest about the partnership. This is a partnership. If I'm working with someone, it's a partnership, which means I own my actions that I'm supposed to do, as in the writing. By the time I'm going to do it, when we're doing the interview prep, I'm going to prep the questions, all of these. But you need to own your side of it as well. All the homework, everything that I give them. And if you can't do it, then communicate. Be honest and say, something's come up. I can't do it this week, whatever. I think it's incredibly important. Truth is, they say truth will set you free, right? And that applies everywhere, in business, in your personal life, in your health, in your spirituality. And so I think it's really important for all of us to be willing to take the look in the mirror, whether it's around your career, your relationship, whatever. Where am I not giving my best? That's the easy question to ask. Where am I not giving my best? And the thing is, we know it in ourselves because you actually feel it. You feel it in your body. You feel it in your spirit. There's something that feels off for you when you know you're not giving your best, whether it's to applying a job or going for the next promotion or something, And if you're going to succeed, anybody who's going to succeed in life, it's always going to require your best foot forward. Now, that doesn't mean your best foot is necessarily the best foot in the moment, because sometimes you're stressed, you're tired, and your best foot could simply be, I'm going to go to the job portal and have a look at what's out there. For today, that's all I can do. My head is full, my brain is foggy, this and that's going on, but I'm going to take one action today, just one. And that's the best action I can take. And that's why I say to people, it's not always about doing the best as people define it. It's about just doing something. Like you say, pick up that book, see what resonates, listen to a podcast, see if it resonates, because there's always a voice out there that resonates for someone, right? Your podcast is going to resonate with all the people looking for the kind of things you're speaking about. Someone else's might be about relationships, someone else's might be about, being a CEO, someone, whatever, or health. I think success comes with action. It's an action thing.
Yes. Yeah. Actually,
You know,
not just thinking or talking, just taking action, focusing on one thing and just getting started. There's so much to be said for momentum. Have you found that when you are not in alignment with your values, you feel more stressed? Like when you are, when an aspect of your work or life is just not aligned?
Absolutely. I think, look, the core values drive everything. And the moment I'm out of alignment with that, then I do feel stressed. At times I can even become unwell, get sick.
Yeah.
I'm quite sensitive, and I do meditation and mindfulness twice a day, morning and night. If I miss, because there have been times when I've missed one, like I wake up in the morning, I've maybe slept in and I haven't done my morning routine. In many ways, for me, that is being out of integrity with myself, because I know that routine, that morning routine, sets me up for the day.
Yes.
But I give myself an out, or I give myself an excuse or whatever. And then what I see is that the day then goes off really quickly. I'm not as sharp. Things start going wrong. And I'm in tune enough now to realize that it's because there's me stepping out of honesty with myself, as in not being my word to myself. I know that morning routine is the strong start for my day, even if I'm tired.
Wendy, thank you so much for sharing some really practical tools and your story, which I appreciated very much. If people would like to reach out and connect with you and perhaps even get your support as a coach, where would you like them to go?
Probably the easiest is the webpage, which is happycareerhub.com, or my LinkedIn. And my LinkedIn handle is Wendy A. Alexander. because I couldn't get Wendy Alexander. I had to put my middle initial in there. So Wendy A. Alexander on
Okay.
LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my work. All my free tips are on LinkedIn. And I post daily and put up videos daily so that people can get some knowledge from me, But if they want to work with me, either of those two places.
Wonderful. And a final thought for those who stuck with us all the way to the end.
Go out and live your life to the best and take the actions. One action every day. One action every day is all you need to do to move towards any form of success.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Everyone, please do click the links in the show notes and connect, and we'll see you in the next episode.